Well, our top story, the French President Emmanuel Macron has landed in China. Macron's arrival will be shortly followed by that of the EU chief, Ursula von der Leyen. The two European leaders seek to smoothen ties with a key economic partner while broaching thorny issues like Ukraine and trade. Macron spoke to the US President Joe Biden shortly before setting out on his first trip to China since 2019. Europe is trying to engage the Chinese President Xi Jinping for hastening the end of the Russia-Ukraine war, in which Macron says China could play a major role.
La guerre menée par la Russie en Ukraine a profondément atteint l'ordre international que nous connaissons depuis 1945. Et cette guerre, plusieurs reprises j'ai qualifié d'impérialiste, de coloniale, est venue en effet fouler aux pieds nombre des principes de la Charte des Nations Unies que deux membres permanents du Conseil de sécurité que nous sommes doivent résolument défendre.
Von der Leyen has not travelled to China since becoming the European Commission President more than 3 years ago. This is her first visit, as that of other European leaders too, to China after the German Chancellor's visit late last year. Now, Europe's relations with China have soured over time, first due to a stalled investment back in 2021, and then the US-led Europe, an integral part of NATO, took umbrage at the Beijing not condemning Russia over Ukraine. For Macron, who is facing an embarrassing pension protest back home, this is an important trip. The trip also offers a chance to strike some economic bargains. For this, he has arrived in China along with a 50-strong business delegation. And the European Commission President says EU must de-risk ties with Beijing. This includes limiting Chinese access to sensitive technology and reducing reliance for key inputs such as critical minerals. The French President invited the EU Commission President to the trip as a way to protect European unity, although he has been more reconciliatory in his approach to China than the EU chief. Macron has pushed the EU to be more robust in its trade relations with China. He has publicly refrained from using strong anti-China rhetoric. Beyond trade, Europe wants to persuade China to use its influence over Russia to bring peace in Ukraine, or at least persuade Beijing to detest from directly supporting Russia. Macron and von der Leyen are expected to convey the message that Xi should talk to the Ukrainian President Zelensky as well. We're now joined by our correspondent Natalie Malgus from Paris for the very latest on this visit. And Natalie, what should we make of the French president's visit to China? On the face of it, it certainly is an attempt to persuade China's mediation in the Ukraine war, but it also is economic, the fact that he is traveling with a 50-plus business delegation.
As you correctly mentioned, this is indeed an important trip for French President Emmanuel Macron. He is being joined by the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. It's, of course, Macron's first visit to the People's Republic of China since his re-election last year. And as you mentioned, von der Leyen's first trip. It's a crucial one. Much that will be discussed will be around the Franco and Chinese relations, which will include business, trade, international relations, and, of course, the war in Ukraine right now. As you mentioned a little earlier, both parties, von der Leyen and Macron, are going to want to implore China to use its influence in ensuring a swift end to the war. A little before they took off for this 3-day meeting, we saw Ursula von der Leyen tweet a little earlier this week that She got off the phone with Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky, again just reiterating Europe's position and approach to the conflict playing out in Ukraine right now, Russia's invasion of the country, calling for peace and a swift end to this war. As you mentioned, China is considered an important trade partner to Europe. There's also quite a sizable business delegation that will be joining both Macron and von der Leyen on this trip, and much of the discussions will also centre around business and trade, given all that has played out since the COVID-19 pandemic.
Right. And Natalie, of course, as you pointed out, an important visit, but also it is indicating more than just the visit by the French president. The fact that the EU Commission president is there shows an indication for a larger message from all of Europe. But on the Chinese side, it could indicate that it could be exploited by the Chinese to wedge a divide between the US and the rest of Europe.
So there's going to have to be some really sensitive diplomatic talk. As you mentioned, these are two senior European leaders that are really going to try and implore and again just convince China to back them and their approach in bringing a swift end to the conflict. Again, just having really polite and diplomatic conversations in that robust trade that you mentioned a little earlier as well. So this is a 3-day high-stake tour of China that will include several meets, several dinners, which both von der Leyen and Macron will attend, and one towards the end of the week that will be a private dinner between the two presidential counterparts.
Right, Natalie. Thanks very much indeed for joining us with the very latest there on the French president's visit to China.